Hi everyone, in this video we'll discuss comparison between Hotchkiss drive and torque tube drive. Here I have drawn the sketch of both the drives. In Hotchkiss drive, front end of spring is fixed on frame with brackets and rear end is supported in shackle with pins. While in case of torque tube drive, both the ends of springs are shackled to frame instead of rear end. Here axle casing is bolted at center of spring, so spring takes only side thrust and weight of vehicle. But in case of Hotchkiss drive, spring takes load of torque reaction, driving thrust, braking thrust and side thrust. Due to torque reaction, front half of spring may deflect near the bracket, and due to deflection, bevel pinion shaft will tend to tilt. And if there is only one universal joint near gearbox, then under torque reaction, propeller shaft will bend. Therefore, to avoid this bending of propeller shaft, another universal joint is used at its rear end. While in case of torque tube drive, the torque reaction, braking torque and driving thrust are taken by torque tube. Here the propeller shaft enclosed in torque tube. The rear end of torque tube is fixed with axle casing and front end is joined to back of gearbox. In torque tube drive, the bevel pinion, propeller shaft and torque tube coincide, and if propeller shaft connected to gearbox shaft by universal joint which is situated exactly at center of cup, then no other universal joint will needed. The torque reaction and driving thrust are transmitted from axle to frame by torque tube. Here in Hotchkiss drive, when axle moves up and down relatively to frame, it has to move in circle whose center lies at front end of spring. Therefore, propeller shaft also has to move in circle, keeping its center at front universal joint. As these two centers does not coincide, therefore the length of propeller shaft always vary. In order to adjust this variation, a sliding joint is provided. Wherein torque tube drive, since both the pinion shaft and propeller shaft will move about same center, that of the cup, while moving up and down, then no universal joint will be necessary. Here torque tube transmit force by directly coupling the axle differential to transmission. Here ball and socket type of joint is used at one end of torque tube to allow relative motion between axle and transmission. The torque tube drive is used in American Ford cars, while Hotchkiss drive is commonly used on passenger cars like Volkswagen, Tata Motors. It also used in heavy commercial vehicles like Ashok Leyland trucks.